Now, we've been talking about Strep A tonight. I know some of you may be watching and really worried about it, or you might just want some more information.
Yeah, well, fear not. We have Dr. Sarah Jarvis with us now for all the advice you need. Firstly, though, good evening to you, Dr. Sarah Jarvis. Firstly, just a reminder, what are the symptoms that people need to look out for?
So there are several symptoms we're thinking about because Strep A can cause all sorts of different conditions. One of the most common is simple sore throat, tonsillitis, but it tends to be a really nasty sore throat with a high fever. That can also be one of the early signs of something called scarlet fever. And we're advising that any child who has scarlet fever, their parents should seek advice so that they can get antibiotics. This will help them to get better quickly, and Strep A does respond very quickly to antibiotics if you catch it early. And it also reduces the chance of it being passed on to other children. There we're looking at a fever, a sore throat, often feeling generally really quite grotty, having a headache, maybe feeling sick or being sick. And then about 12 to 48 hours later, you'll often get what we describe as a sandpaper rash. It starts on your chest or your tummy. In children with pale skin, it looks red, but actually in children with darker skin, it can be difficult to spot. So you're feeling for that sort of sandpaper feeling. And you can have very red cheeks, but pale around the lips. Again, in children with darker skin, they may look more sunburnt. You can also get what we call a strawberry tongue. So there's a sort of white coating on the tongue with little pips like strawberry pips just poking out of it. But we're also concerned, of course, about the serious infection, that so-called IGAS, invasive group A strep. So any child who's got a fever above 38 if they're under 3 months old, above 39 if they're over 3 months old, but who's breathing very, very fast, maybe sucking their ribs in, struggling to breathe, who has a convulsion, who seems very drowsy or is difficult to wake up, you should be seeking emergency help.
OK, that's really helpful and quite a bit to look out for as well. Are you expecting to see a rise in cases in the coming weeks?
I think it's quite likely we'll see a rise in cases. There is normally a sort of ebb and flow of the number of cases, and we've certainly seen more cases than usual. It is important to stress that invasive group A strep, this really nasty kind which has tragically led to these deaths, is still very, very uncommon, even though we're seeing perhaps 5 times or 4.5 times more cases than average in that very highest risk group, which is 1 to 4-year-olds. We're still talking about sort of 1 in 45,000 children being affected over a 10-week period. And as they get older, certainly once they get above the age of 10, the risk does start to drop off, although I'm very conscious that sadly 1 child in year 8 has now passed away.
Oh, well, it's so interesting now getting the advice to go out there and seek antibiotics for children. We spent a lot of years hearing from GPs saying, no, you don't need antibiotics, it's the last resort. What is the advice here for parents? You know, do they just approach their GP asking for their child to get this antibiotics, or what would you say parents and guardians should be doing?
So if you're concerned, do contact NHS 111 or contact your GP. You can usually speak to them and they'll talk you through the symptoms. Not all sore throats are caused by bacterial infection, and not all bacterial infection are Strep A, but there are certain warning signs that your GP is going to be able to look out for, and they'll be able to tell you whether antibiotics are needed. You're quite right, in the great scheme of things, we have to be careful with antibiotics because there is a real risk that if we run out of antibiotics because of resistance, and we are seeing lots more resistance, tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of people could die as a result, and that really isn't an exaggeration. But in the short term, while we've got this high number of cases, it is important that parents seek help.
OK, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for all that advice. I'm sure there's many people watching that with great interest. Thank you very much, Dr. Sarah Jarvis.